It has been a long time since I have been here doing these. This has been a terrible year for me personally, and I've been off quite a bit this year. But when I was off, I got to read books, and so I have a few that I'm going to review that I read while I was recuperating. So, first one is by Owen, Elliot-Kugell, My Mama Cass. And I can't believe it's been 50 years since Cass Elliot died. And if you don't know who Cass Elliot was, she was one of the members of the Mamas and the Papas. And after the Mamas and Papas broke up in 1969, she took on a solo career. And she was turning more into I think the hope was to have a variety show like Carol Burnett, but she appeared on every variety show there was. And I think that's what the direction of her career was. Cabaret singer, variety show star. But unfortunately, she had a triumphant two-night stand in Paris, in London at the Palace Theatre, and she died overnight before the third show. And there's all kinds of stories about her choking on a ham sandwich. That was made up by her publicist because they wanted it to be more spectacular. You can imagine that. Somebody dies and we need it to be more spectacular. Meanwhile, she left a 7-year-old daughter. Owen went to live with Cass's sister Leah and her then husband, famous drummer Rush Kunkel. And she talks about growing up in that family. She talks about trying to discover who her mom was. And she talks about the Mamas and the Papas. She talks about her later work. Her best friends were the Wilson sisters and China Phillips, and she talked about them. So it's kind of a hodgepodge of Hollywood stories, personal stories, and stories about having identity when the people that you want your identity to help you or to help you with your identity don't really do that. And so she had a different childhood, but maybe she would have had a different childhood too with her mom still alive. And that's kind of the question that stays in your mind when you're reading the book. What would it have been like if Mama Cass got to raise her to be a grown-up? And so she's searching for her mama. And Cass Elliot did not like the term mama because she associated it with John Phillips, and they had a very acrimonious relationship. He told her she sang too loud, her voice was too strong, and the record company had other things to say about that. But it is a good read. It's not a fast read, and if you don't know anything really about the time, the late 60s, early 70s, you probably will want to discover more stuff about it. But it's a very good book, and it kept my interest. My Mama Cass. All right, so one of the things I found out, because I was home so much, is a couple of anniversaries happened. 50th anniversary of Watergate. Well, they didn't do too much about Watergate. Probably the most quintessential political thing in my lifetime, next to the Patty Hearst case. And I thought, where's the stuff about Watergate? But the only thing I saw was on C-SPAN, which was great because it was old clips and stuff from the Watergate hearings and all of that. But they really didn't pay much attention to it. And we should never forget when history is wrong. And it points out how wrong we can be. And that is the subject of this book, Kent State. If you were to ask a 20-year-old, what does Kent State mean to you? Probably nothing. It's a part of history that was very, very important when it happened. Very important probably 10, 15 years after it happened. But now it's starting to fade. And this book talks about the families of the victims and the people who were around, and talks about the people who still are alive that remembered it. It followed up on the families of the 4 victims and families of other people who were injured. It's very fascinating in the terms that it's a lot of the emotion. If you've read James Michener's book about Kent State, there's a lot of emotion and a lot of this is the facts kind of thing. And it does a little bit of the facts, but it also talks about the people and why they believed in what they believed in. Now, one thing about Kent State that most people don't remember is that two of the people were not protesting. They were simply going from one part of the campus to the other part of the campus, and they got caught in the crossfire. So to hear about them and to hear about what happened with their folks and their brothers and sisters, it's interesting because they were really, well, everybody was a victim, but they were really in the wrong place at the right time to be part of this. So good read. It's a short read too. It goes really fast. But I would recommend it just to keep that history alive, and I'm glad that we have it here at the library. So, Kent State. The next book is something I just happened to see on the new bookshelf, and after I got back, and it's called Cocaine and Rhinestones, the story of George Jones and Tammy Wynette. And in those days when Tammy was coming up, which is late 60s, she's a girl singer, and they were all girl singers. Patsy Cline was a girl singer. Loretta Lynn was a girl singer. Dottie West was a girl singer. But the Hollywood machine wanted to change what these women were, and they were all talented. Tammy wrote a lot of her songs. She didn't write Stand By Your Man, but her Svengali, Billy Sherrill, did. And the whole relationship between those two and how he crafted her into what Tammy Wynette became, from Your Good Girl's Gonna Go Bad to Stand By Your Man. There's a lot of stuff. He did it with Tanya Tucker the next decade, but it's Svengali in Nashville. I believe he's still alive too. And then George Jones, there's so many George Jones stories out there. Sincerely, one of the most talented men that ever walked through Nashville, and one of the most self-destructive men that ever walked through Nashville. And those stories are in here. Stories about what happened to him throughout his life. What is that, Moon? Great Lightning, or the song, 94 takes to get a take in the studio, but they wanted to do that one. I think it's Fast Lightning or something, and 94 takes, and it cost the studio a lot of money to record that song, and it was a huge hit. He probably recorded the best country song ever written, He Stopped Loving Her Today, and not by the end of his life known as the great singer he was, and he was a great singer, more about the buffoon he became. And it took another woman to bring him out of that, the wife that he had, Nancy, before he died. But it's fascinating. It talks about when Tammy she wasn't as popular as she was, so they staged a kidnapping, and this was her handlers after Cheryl, and the mystery around her death that kind of involved her then husband, George Ritchie. It's a fascinating story of two of the most important people in country music history, and you couldn't put it down. It's just so fascinating to find out that, for her entire life, she kept a bowl of cotton on her coffee table. And the reason that she kept that bowl of cotton is to remind her of where she came from and what she had, if she didn't succeed, what she would go back to, because she picked cotton. She was also a very well-known hairdresser in her day. But then she became a country music legend. And health problems, 4 daughters, lots of drama. She dated Burt Reynolds for a while, but who didn't in the 70s? So really, really good story. And country music is always a fascinating area, how they accept one group of people and not another group of people. I understand there's a book about Katie Lang and country music that's coming out this fall, and I can't wait to read that. Okay, so that's Cocaine and Rhinestones. And also, cocaine's important, if you're George Jones, to his story too. But I won't spoil that for you. Now, it was the 25th anniversary of the death of John F. Kennedy Jr., his wife, Caroline Bessette, and her sister, Lauren Bessette. And this book, Once Upon a Time, The Captivating Life of Carolyn Bessette Kennedy, I didn't get much out of it. And it's just, she she really didn't do anything. I mean, what happened was she worked for Calvin Klein, was in the fashion industry. She had a really cool job. And then she met JFK at a party, JFK Jr. at a party, and boom, and they were combative. They had fights in public. At one point, she threw her engagement ring at him in Central Park, and he sat on a curb and cried because she was being mean to him. She never got to meet his mother because he didn't want her to meet his mother. So that's kind of an indication if he didn't want her to meet Jackie. That's interesting. And then when she became Mrs. John F. Kennedy Jr., she ended up dyeing her hair blonder and wearing the great clothes, but she basically stayed in the house, and she wasn't going to move around the house and too much from where she was. There was talk of drug usage, and by the time she died and he died, there was talk of their marriage not being as stable as everybody thought it was. And so it's interesting, but she's not a person I'm too interested in the Kennedy family. I mean, she had no impact in the Kennedy family. And I'm waiting for the Ethel Kennedy book that they will now write about her since she's not here anymore. And I'm sure that somebody's already got one working. But until that, it's something that I would read on a bus and not pay too much attention to. It took a long time to read it, too, because there's not much that isn't something that you've already read, like in People magazine. So it's not a great book, but I don't think there will be a great book written about her because she was pretty ordinary. However, this one was not ordinary, and this is probably the best book I read this year. This is a reminiscence of John F. Kennedy Jr., from his friends, from his family, from people he worked with, people who knew him just as a celebrity, people who knew him from school. Fun facts that you learn in this book is that he went to school with the dude from Pretty in Pink and was very good friends with him. And David Duchovny, the guy from, what was he in? I forget. But anyway, an actor, and a good actor. He went to school with him and hung out with him in his house, and Mrs. Onassis, and he had some stories about her. And it's just, he grew up in front of America. Not too many people get to grow up from the time you're a baby till the time you die. Prince William comes to mind, Prince Harry comes to mind. But really, not Americans. Political people generally fade away. Even by the time she died, his mother was an icon, but she wasn't as much in the public eye as she used to be. So that was one thing that really affected him. Another relationship that was, if this didn't work, he didn't work, and he needed his relationship, and that was with his sister, Caroline, because she got it. She got what was going on. She took care of him, and at the time of his death, it was said that they were not on speaking terms. But this book says they were, and that they had kind of made up. He did not like Caroline's husband, Ed Schlossberg. He loved the kids, and he was a good uncle. And I never heard any stories about him and Caroline's kids before. I love that people talk about him. The one author of this book, who is Rosemarie Terenzio, she wrote another book about Caroline and John, and very much how much they were so happy and everything. But she's the only one that says that, really, in this book. The other people, his good friends, and he was very good friends with Christina Ampere from CNN, and they went to college together and lived together in college with about 8 other people in a house, and they had a typical college relationship, but they were friends until he died. And so it was weird, all the people that he was very, very close to, but he wasn't really close to too many people. Some of his cousins, Ted Kennedy Jr., William Smith, Kerry Kennedy, who talks in here, Bobby Kennedy Jr., who talks in here, and a couple other people in the Kennedy family. He revered his Aunt Ethel. He revered his mother. His mother was the be-all, end-all. I mean, she wanted him to be president, and they were grooming him, and he was getting ready to talk about what he was going to do, which direction, be a congressman, a senator, or the governor of New York, which is what he wanted to do. But he had to get rid of some of the baggage, and unfortunately, one of the baggages was his marriage. It was not working. He was not living with her at the time of his death. He was living in a hotel, and a little known fact that many people did not know, that he was not living with her. She had retreated, and there were stories about her using drugs and stuff, and he didn't want to be around that, and he couldn't go into politics at that time with that kind of thing dragging behind him. The stories are funny. He never carried money. He's Kennedy. They don't. I know that from personal experience. But anyway, he went through bicycles like people go through gumdrops. He'd park it somewhere. He never had a chain. It'd come out, it's gone. So he goes in the store and buys another one. That's nice that you can do that. He liked certain clothes. He didn't like certain clothes, and he liked being athletic and taking risks. He always wanted to fly, but his mother did not want him to fly, so he didn't take lessons until after her death. He really wasn't able to fly the aircraft that he bought that is dedicated to his father, because of the numbers on the plane were President Kennedy's birthdays. And he did that. And so it was kind of ironic. If I were Kennedy, I wouldn't get in a plane. There's too much stuff there. But he did. He loved flying from the time he was a little boy. He liked to sit in the helicopters with the Air Force and play with the controls and stuff. Grew up in front of our eyes. He had an awkward teenage ship because he failed ninth grade, and he repeated ninth grade. And he had ADD, which they didn't know then what that was, but they did by the time he grew up, and had a pretty normal life. He liked people. He got along with people. Everybody liked him. Nobody thought he was terrible or anything. It's a fascinating read, and it's just little tidbits from people that he knew who grew up with him. He was godfather to 5 or 6 people. One of the most telling stories was he was very close to his cousin Anthony Raswild, who was a prince, and he was dying of cancer. And one morning, about 4 a.m, he came up to his room, because anytime he went to the hospital, he had to do it late at night or early in the morning so that people didn't go crazy, have to go into Anthony's room and stuff. And he sang to him, and they knew he was dying, and they think maybe that was a contributing factor to him not being so aware of what the plane was doing. His mind was preempted, and he was thinking about his cousin dying, because he was like a brother to him. He and Caroline both celebrated their brother that passed when they were in the White House. There's stories, they weren't in this book, but I've heard stories that some of his ashes are at Arlington. A guard told me that, and I kind of believe that he's there. But nobody ever talks, and nobody's going to bother Caroline about it, because there's too much of a burden on her. But this is a good book. It's easy. You can put it down, pick it up. It's something you can, if you're traveling, I would recommend this. A very fascinating portrait. He wasn't dumb like some of his cousins are, but he was complicated because, well, he grew up in front of us. He's America's little prince. And one thing also, before I finish, November 22nd was a hard date. It still is for his sister, but they would leave the country or do a trip somewhere in the country of the United States and be away from the public view. They didn't celebrate it, they didn't go to Mass, and it's something their mother started, it's something that they continue to this day. And he didn't get to shine. He should have shined, he would have, but he didn't get to shine. And at his funeral, his Uncle Ted, Senator Kennedy, said, was too much for us to dream that he would be able to comb gray hair when he won't be able to. I think that's a really fitting thing to say. Good book, best book I've read this year. And that's it for me for now. And hopefully I'll be back and we'll get some new books, because I was looking at the new bookshelf and there's some stuff I want to read. So thank you.